It might take me a while to get used to that because I'm used to being shepherded by the journalists on Media Indigenous.
Well, Lakotas don't really do any shepherding. That's kind of like a Navajo and a Pueblo thing.
Shepherding.
I don't know anything about shepherding.
Except Kent Monkman did a painting of you where you were like shepherding a bunch of buffalo.
This is, oh God, this is true.
Talk about free range, huh?
Yeah. Well, actually, we have a really amazing panel today. We'll just go around and have everyone introduce themselves. Jen, if you want to start us off.
All right. My name is Jen Marley. I'm in the Red Nation, co-founder of the Pueblo Feminist Caucus, grad student, the UNM American Studies Department, from the Pueblo of San Ildefonso. And I'm the new Red Nation podcast co-host. Great to be here.
And then I'll just shoot it over to Melanie.
Hey, what's up, Yacht everyone? Melanie Yazzie. I'm the host of the Red Power Hour podcast, kind of our companion podcast to this one. Happy to be back for Settlers Gone Wild Part 2.
Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Tallbear. I'm a citizen of the Siston Wapton Oyate, but I also grew up in Flandreau, South Dakota, and in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta, and I am a regular on the Media Indigena podcast with Rick Harp.
And last but not least, thanks, Kim. Sorry to interrupt. And last but not least, Andre.
Yep, my name is Andre. I am a contributing editor at Maclean's Magazine, also co-host of the Drop Squad podcast, and happen to be a grad student in history at York University.
Cool. This is going to be an amazing panel. And I just want to put this out there because this is on everyone's mind right now. We all want to know why Andre thinks the first 3 episodes of Star Wars are the best episodes because it's trash.
Okay. Hold on. First of all, I did not come on here to be I did not come on here to be ambushed for presenting new ideas. Okay. Once again, I'm being attacked. Is that why you wanted to have me on here? Like the whole, the inauguration was just a ruse. Like that was a red herring. You brought me on here to be ambushed.
The first time we had Andre on, the first question that came out was like, "So we heard you use mayonnaise in your mashed potatoes."
Every time. What? Are you serious? Would you like to go down a litany of like things that I do that people don't like? Because I'm not giving up the mayonnaise and the mashed potato. It's delicious. All right. And if you haven't tried it yourself by now, or maybe you haven't, that's why you're making fun of me for it to like bring the heat off of you. I don't know.
I mean, you know me, I'll eat anything, but that Star Wars fact.
Okay. Hey yo, I love how you presented it as a fact, not an opinion, but a fact. It tells me you agree, but you can't say it in front of your little friends or whatever. It's all good.
Just keep those things to yourself. Just kidding.
No, but like Indians really love Star Wars, right? It's like a whole thing. It was like the Baby Yoda phenomenon of 2019, and like we interpret a lot of politics through Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of opinions about it.
Lots of opinions.
Tons of native Star Wars art.
Just you guys, I have no opinions. I don't watch any of this stuff, so I'm totally out of the conversation.
Kim's like, can we move on?
No, I'm happy. I did see all the Baby Yoda memes. That was cute.
Yeah. So
and they had to ruin it by naming Baby Yoda Grogu or whatever. And somebody on Twitter was like, "No, we're not calling him that. His name is Yodito." That's what I call him now.
So let's just get this started. What what are people's first reactions to the inauguration? I know some of you didn't watch it, and so sometimes it's better to view it secondhand through like Twitter or Facebook. So I don't know, Kim. I was watching your Facebook feed. Your go-to in times of peril and in times of settler peril. So
Well,
let's get your first.
I closed down Facebook a few days ago completely. Did you know
Oh,
that?
you did?
Yeah,
Wow, good for you.
I can't take the American delusions anymore. I just can't. I can't take it. Really, I'm like, I'm gonna get grumpy here, and I don't need to be grumpy with people. It won't change their minds. So I'm over on Twitter now, where I'm more publicly accountable, and I don't like have all people that I'm emotionally invested in over there, like my friends and family on Facebook. Anyway, but I watched the inauguration this morning while I was putting my makeup on my phone. It I was sitting there talking sounding like my mother, Leanne, who yells at the news all day long. It was just total propaganda, right? Like CNN is just total propaganda. And they even when they had the little clips to introduce the inauguration, like in their little ad, they had like this Hollywood action film music, like it was a war. It was just ridiculous. Like the triumphal
Gross.
scene at the end of a war movie. Yeah, it really. Anyway, so total propaganda. I mean, total, U.S. exceptionalist narratives talking about peace and unity, and we can talk about the sort of genocidal quality of U.S. unity within its borders, but just unity against the rest of the world, like that's what was coming out, right? It just total unity
Yeah.
against the rest of the world and total
Yeah.
suppression within the state to gain that unity. And then talking about, we believe in facts and truth. I'm like, not as far as I can tell. So that it was just totally farcical. Anyway, as you knew, I would probably think.
I didn't watch any of the actual like mainstream news. We don't actually have TV at our house. We just have all the streaming stuff, and so we watched it on YouTube or whatever. So I didn't see like the fantastical war kind of stuff on CNN. I will say this week there have been so many settlers going wild. Like I cannot tell you, I've gotten things in my inbox like settlers from across the entire political spectrum. It has been the white settler fragility around the inauguration was really, I was not prepared for it. I did 2 public presentations over the last 48 hours and experienced some really like interesting aggression, intense aggression from white folks in the audience who are just like die hard for Biden. I think it's just because they were just so happy that Trump left, but just like a lot of liberal settler fragility. So, which was an interesting counterpoint to the fascist settler fragility we saw 2 weeks prior. And so it was like interesting to see like it was the same kind of settler ontology being played out as something I noticed, even though these are people who claim to be on like opposite ends of the political spectrum. And then we can talk more about the Woody Guthrie controversy.
Oh God! Actually,
online.
Yeah, and Kim did a whole podcast.
And then there was like the whole like all of these left settlers like lost their shit on Twitter, like all of these anarchists and socialists who are like, Woody Guthrie was a communist. How dare you?
I know. It's a worker song.
That was for workers.
Apparently, indigenous people aren't workers. So it's like this is the easiest. Like I don't know. Yeah, that was. I think what Melanie brings up is an important point because there is like an aggrieved like settler subjectivity, basically, to use a very academic term, on both sides, right? You have the white fascists who are, like they don't believe in any form of equality, and they think of everything as an assault on their their basic privilege and benefits that they receive. Whereas there's the other side of it, and this includes a lot of Native people too. This isn't just like a white thing, and I think Kim was right to point that out. There's an aggrieved kind of victimhood mentality, and rightfully so, because like the Trump administration was really awful for a lot of Native people, but it was also awful for the rest of the world. But then to project one's politics on like, oh, the aggrieved kind of like injured liberal subject, like actual like liberalism, then becomes like the new kind of like the new form of like retaliation and how dare you, and somebody even got mad because I made a comment about the play Hamilton, which is like a complete fabrication of history. And somebody is like, you're attacking a young black woman. How dare you? And it was like the poet, the poet laureate. It was misidentified. Actually, the real poet laureate is Joy Harjo. and it wasn't this young Amanda. I forgot her last name. This young Black woman, but it was, and somebody was like, and I was like, somebody was like, well, you have to just remember that she's a very young person, and that she's a Black woman, and how dare you critique her? And I was like, I wasn't critiquing her. I was saying that the fact that you're referencing like literal fake history about Alexander Hamilton as this like immigrant to the United States is actually like incredibly destructive. And they were like, I was just feeling raw today. And I was like, what? Like, how are you? Like, you guys won. Like, like, you literally control the military now. You control the Congress. You control the Senate. How are you feeling aggrieved in this moment in time?
The way I've seen people use like so-called feminist talking points, which is really just like settler white stream ass bullshit, to like frame their points and grievances like about critiques of the inauguration has been out of control. And I think the most ridiculous example I saw was people talking about the famous Bernie meme, right, where he's sitting there with his mittens, people talking about how his posture just indicated such disrespect and sexism to Kamala, and how it like exemplifies like the patriarchy. And it's like, wow, he doesn't even bother to put in the emotional labor to look like he cares. And it's like, oh god, it's been fascinating. And then of course, like you said, with the poet, like a lot of people saying things like similar to what you were told by whoever on Twitter.
So what were your reflections, Andre?
Reflections? I was sleeping. Literally went to bed at about 5 a.m. the night before just to make sure that, like, because my partner is like a political normie and, was going to watch the inauguration. So I know that if I was watching it right next to her, there's no way that I could have just shut up through it. So I was like, you know what? Let me just like go to sleep and then keep the peace in this household. And then I woke up to some amazing tweets, one of which was just like liberal white women absolutely melting down over Bernie's coat and mittens.
Right. That's what, yeah.
And they're still going. They're still like, right now. I don't know what is going on.
Yeah,
Wait.
did you see that what was it that, he can do the emotional labor like all women have to do? I'm like, "Speak for yourself, honey, I don't do that kind of emotional labor." I would have been off with Bernie sitting there with my hands crossed like, "Give me a break."
Why don't you explain that? Because that one was like, that was a cringe. Like,
It was absurd. I
Yeah.
almost couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I don't even remember who she was. I don't follow her, but she was getting a lot of retweets, and it what looked to be a white woman, maybe in her 40s or something, and just saying, women have to do this emotional labor all the time, and try to get along and support people even when we don't fully agree, and it's just a mark of his, white male privilege or whatever or just maybe male privilege that he was sitting there. I mean, you don't know what was in his head, number one, and I don't know. I thought I just didn't get it, but then she kind of got called into line, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
she,
everyone got
yeah.
her together real quick. And the thing was, like, people, I think, misunderstand what the concept of emotional labor is.
Mm-hmm.
So emotional labor is not like putting like thoughts and feelings into things. Emotional labor is, think of like a flight attendant, for example. Somebody who works on an airline, and along with being paid to do flight attendant things, they also have to do it with a smile on their face and exude positive emotions. Or somebody who's working in retail, the very same thing, service with a smile. So you're not just being paid to perform a task or a service of some sort. You're paid to express emotions that makes the customer feel, especially if you're in a customer-facing environment, makes the customer feel as if you're happy to see them, and they like you're happy that they're there. And it's actually like crept into so many aspects of it's crept into gender politics in the household. It's crept into relationships in the workplace, not just with customer facing work, but also like between coworkers and between managers and executives and, rank and file employees. It's crept into pretty much everything. And there's an author named Arlie Russell Hochschild who wrote a book called The Managed Heart. And it talks about how like emotions have now been commoditized. Like it's been brought into the labor equation so that you're not only required to sell your labor as a human being, but you're also required to give your emotions away. There's no sale of the emotion because you're being paid for your labor, but the emotions are an extra thing that you have to throw in. So it was weird for this person to say, as she said something like, stone cold feminist take here, but if the women here have to perform emotional labor, then Bernie Sanders should have to perform emotional labor too. And I said, okay, that's a strange way to look at it. And then she said further down the thread that, she's like, she said she's for emotional labor. And I said, whoa. Like, materialist feminist analysis is actually highly against emotional labor. Like, materialist feminist analysis would hold that it's bad for all of us. So that was just a really weird thing to say.
I mean, she was like obviously a liberal, stone cold liberal, and like ultimately it was like the defense of like Kamala. Like, she was implying that it was like disrespect to, like Kamala and the women present. So I mean, it's just it's like a defense of, neoliberalism more than it is a defense of women or feminism or anything.
Yeah, it's not like, it doesn't come across as a defense of women. It comes across as like, and they I think it's like they disguise it under a feminist critique, but what it actually is defending like bourgeois aesthetics. It's defending it's like, it's actually classism that's like highly wrapped up and disguised in like woke and feminist language. And I find that so like disrespectful, because it's like there are actual issues that, okay, for example, if student loan amnesty was instituted on day one, because the president has the power to eliminate all federal student loans. If the president directs the Secretary of Education to grant amnesty on federally backed student loans, they don't require the consent of Congress to do so. The Secretary of Education can just go ahead and do that. And who would be proportionally the largest beneficiary of student loan amnesty would be Black women, because Black women are the fastest rising percentage of people with post-secondary degrees. But that also means that they're disproportionately holding student loans. So if people, for example, are looking at like a feminist analysis in terms of policy, and they're looking at it from a materialist point of view, they would say things like, student loan amnesty. They would say things like Medicare for all, because these are things that benefit women of color. But they're talking about clothing designers. So it tells me that your focus is not on policy, it's on aesthetics. And that is so, not only is it very liberal and not only is it very bourgeois, but it's also treating people like you think that they're not smart at all and can't tell subtext. And it's like, just like, don't talk to me like I have no common sense. You know what I mean?
Right. Or maybe they might mention the fact that Kamala's school truancy policies disproportionately impacted Black mothers, and like she blatantly advocated for their policing.
Yeah, she's a child cop.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the memes are still going around, showing like Kamala Harris like literally handcuffing her child.
Yeah,
it's an awful meme. It's terrible. I shouldn't be laughing, but unfortunately, I'm just a problematic human being, so I can't help myself.
Well, her dad was like is a Marxist economist, isn't he? Like,
and he hates her. He's like,
I don't know if it's fair to say he hates her. Like, we don't know that.
He has spoken out strongly against her. Like, he does not support her. Like,
he's troubled by some of her statements that aren't very truthy.
Yeah, he's actually from the same parish in Jamaica that my family's from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he went to Titchfield Academy. Like, so Titchfield Academy is like this school in Portland, Jamaica, and some people who go there tend to go on to be very successful people. So people in my family have gone to Titchfield, and they went on to be very successessful people. I'm just
What about you?
Oh no, I went to school in Toronto, and I turned out to be like a total reject. So you can see how this turned out, right? In South Florida, and look what happened to me. I should have gone to Titchfield instead. But Donald Harris is an economist at Stanford. I don't know if he's ever actually like openly identified as Marxist, but he definitely has Marxist analysis. When I discovered his papers last year, I started reading his papers last year, and I was like, holy smokes, I think everybody on the left should read Donald Harris's papers. He is so good. He is able to talk about, for example, like the Black American quote unquote ghetto, because he was writing about the stuff in the 60s and 70s, but when he'd write about the Black American ghetto, he would write about it as an internalized colony in America. when he talks about capital and black labor, he would say that capital depends on racism for the reproduction of labor exploitation. It's like, this dude's analysis is on point. He's so good. He even critiqued this book called the Political Economy of the Black Ghetto, which a lot of socialists seem to like, but I think he does sort of like a Cedric Robinson kind of approach, which is finding a Marxist analysis that is intersected with race, and just showing these white socialists okay, that was a very cute attempt that you made. Now let me show you how it's done. He's actually a really, really good author. And I want to interview him someday. And I highly suggest that if anybody can get those of us who are in or associated with the Red Nation in contact with Donald Harris, please do so, because the dude is on point.
You heard it here, Don.
Yeah, he's actually a listener.
Yeah.
He's a super fan on Patreon.
He's like, yeah.
Seriously?
Exactly.
No.
No, I just,
Like, what? You guys didn't like him.
I'm yanking your chain.
No. He's at our $100 subscriber level where he gets
$100 subscriber.
Indian
Yeah.
name.
Well, now he might be, but he's getting such a plug from y'all.
Yeah, he's username red green gold 56789 on the Red Nation, yeah.
Is Kami Kamala is his hand.
Oh, burn.
Well, I think what you brought up, Andre, is actually a really good point, because there is an aesthetic kind of that Biden is pushing, an aesthetic towards politics and the representation of diversity, and I think that was very much apparent at the inauguration. Even though they didn't do a land back, it's like Verizon Wireless is now doing, or excuse me, they didn't do a land acknowledgement, but Verizon Wireless is now doing land acknowledgements.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it's partly because the guy that they hired to do the land acknowledgement, he goes by the name Q Savage. We talked about him last.
He showed up 2 weeks too early.
Yeah.
He was like, what? I thought this was it.
He's the guy who took the Senate chambers and sat in Pence's seat. They should have got him, seriously, because it's it's all a spectacle anyways. But one
The
thing,
guy in the guy in the Tatanka hat.
yes,
Yeah,
we call him Q Savage.
Q Savage.
He's a relative of Johnny Depp.
Yeah, did you see the meme where
I was gonna
someone
say.
had there was a picture of him entering the Capitol, and he's like, "Hey guys, I'm here to do the land acknowledgement."
No, I didn't see that one.
You
Oh,
know,
shoot, I
yeah.
missed it.
Instead, they had J-Lo lip syncing "This Land Is Your Land."
Oh,
God.
Anyways,
well, let's talk
I mean,
about it.
speaking. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
I was
let's
gonna
talk about it. Let's jump right in it, because I was going to get to the the diversity stuff and the aesthetics, because it's like well, we had this conversation last night, so I'll just bring it into this dialogue. But some people call it just plastic surgery, right? They're just changing the face of a new administration that essentially is going to do the same kinds of things foreign policy wise, and in some ways they're going to tighten the screws on places like Venezuela, right? We had a debate. I don't believe that Trump has ever had plastic surgery, but I do believe that Biden has had plastic surgery.
So we gave an intense presentation last night about the future of humanity, and then my sister texted me and she was like, "No, Biden has definitely had plastic surgery." So this was the most important moment of the evening.
Am I the only one? He looks like the Mask. He looks like the Mask, just without green makeup. He had to have had plastic surgery.
No.
Don't
He's
you-
Oh, yeah,
wearing
it's way
white
too tight.
makeup over his green mask. That's what's happening.
God.
No.
I mean, speaking to aesthetics, outside of his actual physical appearance too, I think an example of that was the news that the fucking pride flag, sorry, excuse my language, could be flown at US embassies, straight up homo imperialism, and then contrasted against his history of blatant anti-LGBTQ sentiment over the years. He voted to block amendments that would allow same-sex couples to cohabitate. He tried to say that gay people were a security risk. He voted to block the immigration of HIV positive people. He voted to cut funding to schools that were blatantly accepting of LGBTQ students. And so I thought that was just a really blatant example of the way aesthetics are being used to kind of cover up literally his entire political track record.
He brings a lot of people from the Obama administration as well. Like, and I think the strategy is like just an Obama era strategy. Like he's literally just a reboot. He's Obama 2.0. You know, he's our third black president. First was Clinton, second was Obama, and third is Joe Biden. And this is based on Andre's Twitter feed. It's a trustworthy news source.
No, my Twitter feed is nothing but cursed posts from liberals is what it is. It started off like I had like Marxist analysis going on for a little while there, and then people would just be like, "Hey, have you seen this?" And they would drop it off in my DMs. And then now they've just gotten so bold that they drop off cursed liberal tweets like right in my mentions that have nothing to do with anything. It's like if you've seen that movie Bird Box, and that like British guy that's in the house that is like trying to expose everybody in the house to the outdoors because whatever creature's lurking outdoors that like makes them like, you know, go absolutely insane by simply looking out of the window. The guy like forces this old woman's eyes open and then she's possessed by the creature. And I feel like that's what people do to me in my Twitter threads. So if you see some like awful liberal, like just these awful takes where they're like, I don't know, like fantasizing about Joe and Jill Biden just smashing all over the White House, or if they're talking about like
what? That happens?
Oh my God, yes, it happens. Do you understand how much I have to go through simply to log onto my account? It is awful. It's just a minefield.
Yeah, I don't really like. I follow you, but I don't follow you anymore because it's like it's the cringiest. I mean, the analysis is spot on, but it's like, how do you live in that world? Like,
oh no.
All I was trying to do was introduce people to theory through pithy tweets. And now what it is just it's just cursed. Like it's opening up my Twitter app on my phone is like opening the Necronomicon, right? Like I actually have to like pour salt across my lintel and say like 3 novenas before I can log on to Twitter now. It's fucking awful. These liberals are
Well,
it's
damn,
the
props
worst
to you.
shit I have to go through in a day. I see people like talking about politicians like they're playing house, like little children playing house, and calling these politicians their mommy and daddy, and they have little tea parties, or they like compare them to the Avengers, or they have these like really weird and twisted like sex fantasies about what politicians are doing to each other.
I've seen that.
Or they talk about them like they're the cast of Friends, like Joe and Jill just like hanging out with like Barack and Michelle, and you know Kamala like brought over a bottle of wine, and Doug, and this is where like things get very dark. And then Doug like gets cucked because they engage in group sex, and he has to sit there tied to a chair and watch. Like it's just,
okay, these are real tweets.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, I see the like Biden is daddy shit all the time. Like just super like hypersexualization of Joe Biden. Like people are showing pictures of young Joe Biden and they're like, let him bust it wide open. Like very vulgar.
Really, I have totally missed this world.
I'm so glad you have.
Holy moly.
I live vicariously through Andre in this world. Like that's the only way.
Now you understand why I sage my home office before I start work and before I go to bed at night.
Oh my God.
By the way, Joe Biden does have the Necronomicon. Did you see the Bible he took?
Nick said that, and someone was like, "That's unfair. That's his family Bible."
I was like, even worse. It's like, so it is the Necronomicon.
I know.
Wow. What
and I will say, as the owner of a large family Bible myself, I don't think that was a Bible. I really don't.
Necronomicon.
Everybody's got like especially if you're in a Baptist family, like my family is traditionally like Baptist and Pentecostal. So we've got like my great grandmother's Bible, which is about the size of like it's like a foam mattress. Okay, it's about the size of a Casper mattress. I stand it up on the narrow edge and I lean it against my bookshelf, and then I brace the other side with metal struts to make sure it doesn't tip over. And having a Bible like that, I know from big Bibles, and what Joe Biden got sworn in on was not a Bible. I'm sorry, I hate to disrupt the conversation. I had to bring in my expert analysis. Okay.
So Kim, Media Indigena did an entire episode, as I understand it, on Woody Guthrie. Can you put to bed, or that's not even the right?
Oh, it was part of it. It was part of an episode. Yeah.
Like,
It was around Charlottesville.
Song. Yeah, give us a breakdown of that song. And
well, I'd have to bring up the lyrics, right? Like somebody has to, because I don't have them in front of me. I mean, basically, so I think we talked about it in the context of what happened at Charlottesville. When was that? 2017 now?
yeah.
Um, and my co-parent and my daughter live in Charlottesville, so I'm there every other month, at least before COVID. And I didn't happen to be there when all that stuff went down, but of course the Woody Guthrie song came out, right? And it was really, so we talk on that episode. It's episode, I think it's episode 167. And it's one of our summer episodes. That's a compilation of different episodes throughout the year. So we did this in June 2019. We put this compilation together, but in part of it, we talk about the Woody Guthrie song and the sort of not, indigenous erasure inherent in that. And I was really thinking a lot about, and we talk about this in this episode, we have a whole conversation, and Tate Walker's on with us too, who's also Lakota. We were talking a lot about the monuments coming down and the right saying, where does it stop? And I said, that's a legitimate question. It doesn't stop. All those slaveholders and Indian killers come down, all of them, including all the ones that they have on that, is it Jimmy Kimmel ad now? Like even the good ones that the liberals love and the, beautiful, austere white in DC, they all should come I agree. I don't think the right's totally wrong in some of the questions that they ask. So anyway, we have that conversation and about the misguided nature of responding to the right with our own sort of, let's just have other heroes, other kind of humans. And then we had a conversation about maybe we don't need to elevate humans at all above the land, with all of this memorializing of humans. Maybe that in and of itself is a sign that we have really broken relations with the planet. So anyway, but the kind of the song started us out on that. And Native people, this song always comes out at these in these kind of lefty or liberal moments. I won't say lefty here. I think it's more liberal. I don't know. You all might know more than I do about that, but it always comes out. And I've had literal friends, close colleagues, cite that song in front of me while I'm standing there, and I'm just like, you know me, you know my work, and you're still going to say something like that. It's shocking, but it's not, right? People see you, but they don't see you as an Indigenous person. They just don't see you, and they don't. It really. I didn't really break the song down, but
no, I mean, I think it's important, like everything you pointed out, because it is a question of like, it's like everyone's afraid of decolonization because they're like, when does it stop? And it's like, do you understand, like this, like we said in the last podcast, this is a cake that has been baked, and you cannot unbake a cake. Like the very fabric of colonialism in this country, like that's built on Native genocide, so ingrained in the dominant culture.
This is why I've been tweeting, because I've been tweeting this is a very poor excuse for Indigenous genocide, the state of this and meaning there is no good excuse. But I really do think I want people to realize that they think there is a good excuse for Indigenous genocide. They must, if they want to maintain what they have, right? I mean, we can get into a whole other conversation about what does decolonization mean for everybody. And this is why I'm also I'm writing a lot, both academically and on social media, about, what it means to be a good relative. And we really need to replace that other narrative, which is crashing and burning. And obviously, because they have to elevate it to such farcical propaganda in the form of Biden's inauguration speech. It was utterly farcical. The mainstream news in the U.S. is utterly farcical. So it's clear that it's a failing narrative because they're having to shore it up in even more ludicrous ways, right? So what do we replace that with? And that's a lot of, what I've been trying to talk about. So.
Yeah, I think this, that was such a good way to put it, Kim. Like, you have to be willing, like openly willing to justify genocide to sing a song like that, right, at a Democratic inauguration for a Democratic president. And it reminds me, do folks remember 4 years ago, almost exactly 4 years ago, the airport protests, right? So Trump had just been inaugurated, and then he issued what was known as the Muslim ban, right? And then lots of different kinds of people, but primarily liberals, just erupted, and then they took to protest. They were staging, there were like tens of thousands of people at JFK. Nick and I were living in Southern California at the time. We went to LAX. There was like 50, 60,000 people. It's actually the largest protest I've ever been in.
Tom Morello was there.
I'm done with my comment. No, I'm just kidding. And like, like these motherfuckers were singing this song. Do you remember seeing the footage? I think it was the very first one that happened organically was at JFK, and people were singing the Woody Guthrie song. They were singing the Star Spangled Banner from Sea to Shining Sea. And like what this was like January 2017, like Ocheti Shakoi camp up at Standing Rock was literally still going on at the same time when these airport protests erupted. And I was just like watching these live streams on Facebook and on Twitter, and I was like, you got to be effing kidding me. These white people are at these white liberals are at these airports singing this like glorified Manifest Destiny bullshit when they have just been watching on their favorite like Democracy Now episode, like the horrific violence that Native people have been experiencing for months at Standing Rock from the US state, speaking openly for the first time in a long time in mainstream media about what settler colonialism looks like, what genocide looks like. And I can guarantee you those white liberals were supporting Standing Rock, and then they immediately just switch. They just switch right back in to like Manifest Destiny, and they're like, yes.
Mhm.
And it's because of like the total bullshit settler nationalist narrative around immigration, right?
Mhm.
Like they just slip right back into that nativism that allows them to have this like moment of innocence as like immigrants coming to America. And they don't actually see the contradiction between supporting something like that and then also supporting something like Standing Rock. I was so appalled. Like Nick and I literally, we just went into our backyard. We made some signs, the no ban on stolen land hashtag that actually I got from my friend Jody Bird's page. A
Mhm.
colleague of hers, Laura Fujikawa, had actually coined that. And then we went to that protest, and I was like, God damn it. Like, we need to make some sort of intervention in this settler nonsense happening here. And like the no ban on stolen land thing, at least from my perspective, I'm sure it meant something different for other people, was much more about invoking this idea, right? This ethics of relationality that you're talking about, Kim. It's like, actually, to be a good relative, you know what you have to do? Why don't you actually look to indigenous traditions of governance and belonging and
Yeah.
membership as a way of like welcoming people to this land? Because this land ain't your land, settler. Like, pilgrim,
Well,
go home, It's
and this
our
is what
land.
it's what happened historically too. You can come and be relatives, but you want to just wipe us out and replace us and steal everything.
Exactly.
That's what settlers wanted. They didn't have
Exactly.
to be settlers. They could have been relatives. Some people were. I love that when you guys did that sign. So what was the reaction in the crowd when you because I remember tweeting out pictures of you two with that sign. I
It
thought it
was
was so powerful.
It was powerful. We found like literally we found like the 12 other Indians at the protest, and
Right away.
like seriously we're like, there's the drum and the sage, and then
Mhm.
like we went through, it was at the international, I mean, anyone who's been to LAX knows that it's like the craziest most massive airport in the country, and we somehow found each other. And then some indigenous folks, so I was later sort of scolded by a Tongva colleague. I didn't realize there weren't actually any Tongva people in our little crew of indigenous people there to do a welcoming ceremony, and so that was like our bad, for not having that, the people actually of the land that LA now sits
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Um, but there was like an indigenous welcoming ceremony, and it was extended to two. I think it was like a few. I believe they were young women. I don't remember if they were in hijab. Do you remember what happened,
One of
Nick?
them was a family member who was actually their family member was detained inside the airport
Mm,
at the time, and I think there was like 5 people
okay.
that they had detained, and so she was there, and she was wearing an American flag as a hijab. I mean, so there's that element to it as
I
well.
mean, like, yeah, we're all at different levels of our political
Like,
development.
no judgment in that moment in time, but I think the ceremony itself, that like it was like a welcoming ceremony.
Yeah, it was actually right, enacting this type of indigenous political order, right? This kinship, like this idea of making relatives, right? Which is actually, as you say, Kim, fundamentally different than like just stealing the land, and just taking it by violence, and genocide. And they cried, like people were crying, like there was there's just crowd that kind of circled around us as we were doing this, and people were just watching, like, and I think people were kind of dumbfounded. They're like, what's happening here? But when they realized what was happening, like, no one had ever seen that happen before. And then I tell you what, like it was really like 50 or 60,000 people. The 12 Indians literally took charge of that entire group of people and marched all the way, did a victory lap around whatever that the circle is at the Bradley International Terminal, singing with the drum going, and people just followed us. Like they literally from the moment after the welcoming ceremony ended, they just followed us. And it was actually, and then, like then it got chaotic again and people went and did their own thing because it was so massive. It was hard. You can't like
Yeah.
control those things, but it was actually like a deeply powerful moment. And I was really appreciative that it went viral because it did, it shot that flaming heart into that flaming arrow into the heart of whiteness that was happening at those airport protests. And this like goddamn narrative of like immigration, and this like sea to shining sea bullshit, this like settler nationalism. And so to see it just happening again, it's just like Groundhog Day living in a settler society as an indigenous person. You're like, how are you not seeing this? Or like the white liberals, like this white lady, right? This white lady going ham on Bernie, on Twitter, just being like so fragile about their like new like settler Democrat president. And it's like, this doesn't belong to you. Like Black and indigenous folks like literally just chopped the heads off of colonizers last year. And like your response is try to recuperate like this narrative. It's just so gross.
Well, you kind of answered a question for me too. When I was like growing up in rural South Dakota, I remember being like 15 and thinking, do these white people, I didn't believe they really believed all their BS. Like I thought they were just trying to save face because they knew that their ancestors stole everything and they benefited from Dakota genocide. And then I finally realized about 18 or 19, oh my God, I think they really believe. Like I was shocked. So that's always been a question for me. I guess they do. I guess.
They do. It is like they have like a possessive investment in their settler ontology that's of course attached to their whiteness. I mean, the feeling of it. Like I gave a presentation on Wednesday at a prominent university, and a very famous white scholar, a white feminist scholar, lost her shit on me because I said that Native people don't want to save the soul of America because the soul of America is white supremacy and genocide.
Oh, fist pump.
Yes. I was like, where's the lie? Where's the lie? Like literally like if 2020 taught you anything, right? Then like it should have taught you that basic fundamental truth. And like who thought that would be a controversial thing to say? Apparently it was on the day of like a Harris Biden, inauguration where like white liberals, including in the academy, are just having like such intense feelings of attachment. They're, what is it? What was Biden's thing? Build back better, or like
build better back. I keep saying build better back, and it reminds me of my bar. I only get a butt by going to bar.
Oh no! You just triggered some thoughts. So
okay,
what's going to happen?
Sorry.
What's going to happen now? Is I'm going to log into my account tomorrow morning, and somebody is going to say "build better back," i.e., like.
I get it.
You know where I'm going. You know where I'm going with this.
Oh.
Okay, never mind. I'm not going to finish the joke. I can't do it on your podcast.
There's only one way to do that, and that's squats.
I was going to say, like going back to the song "This Land," I think there's a lot to be said about choosing J-Lo to sing it, right? Because she herself, if I'm not mistaken, has actually made false claims to indigeneity, saying that she's like Taino or like the descendant of Taino people, as it's convenient for her. And I remember going to an ASA panel, and somebody's paper was about how this band, Chicano Batman, had performed that song in a Modelo commercial that was like filmed in Boyle Heights, and there was like, I mean, the whole critique, yeah, and so apparently I found out like after the fact that this band that calls themselves Chicano Batman, they also claim indigeneity, and like the Mixteca Aztec stuff or whatever, and and so the whole paper was like critiquing this commercial in which they're performing this song to like, portray like these really warped ideas of like multiculturalism and like these, this understanding of immigration that's, premised in like taking, not actually making relations. So I think there's a lot to be said too about, thinking about kinship and it's especially like the way Indigenous people conceive kinship, while that song has also historically been used to invoke these like false claims to indigeneity that like completely disregard Indigenous kinship. And it's been bizarre, but that's what's been in the back of my mind thinking about that.
The first time I ever heard, I'll tell you a story. The first time I ever heard it, because actually, the first time I ever heard that song was actually sung in a leftist space, and at the time, I was very politicized by the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and that's actually when I became like a political person, and I stopped standing for the Pledge of Allegiance in protest of the war specifically. I hadn't really connected it to like being indigenous at the time, but that was my protest, and I remember getting hazed at school, at the high school. It's like one of 5 indigenous students, and just being called all kinds of like awful names and being jeered at, during lunchtime, or like even during, when they would sing the national anthem, I would sit, or when they would say the Pledge of Allegiance, I would sit. And I refused to play it. I was in band, and I refused to play it in band. I refused to sing it in choir. But it was like this weird, it was like a profoundly alienating experience, because it's like, this is what it means to actually stand against this like US nationalism. And so I got involved in a lot of left groups, and it was primarily like anarchist groups at the time, because that was the only thing that was going on in South Dakota. And I remember I went to an anarchist convention. You know how like anarchists are really into like the folk revival stuff, like putting on suspenders and like playing banjo.
I didn't know this. Okay.
Yeah, it's
yeah, it's a whole thing.
Okay.
I'm not trying to like make fun of it. I have friends who do that stuff, but I'm not into it. I never like got the anarchist aesthetic. I would just show up.
I saw the banjo in your closet.
Yeah, but I never did the whole get up with like the patch pants and like the what do they call it? What's that called? Crust.
The crust.
Yeah, I didn't do the crust thing because I showered every day. I still shower every day.
I am learning so much here. Now it's all making sense.
I remember even once I showed up to a Black Bloc protest with like a Crazy Horse shirt that was yellow and like khaki like jean coats or something, and people were like, "What are you wearing?
You're supposed to be in the Black Bloc uniform."
Yeah, and I was like, "Hand-me-downs."
Like, got this at the thrift store.
Yeah, I was like, "These are actually my brother's clothes."
They don't fit you correctly.
I didn't have enough to go to Hot Topic.
You didn't have your anarchist outfit on.
But anyways, so I went to this conference, and like everyone was like cool and radical, like against the war. It was like it was my entry point into politics. And this all-white folk band got up and started playing "This Land Is My," or "This Land Is Your Land," and I was like,
Oh.
and I looked around, and all my friends, most of whom were white in this anarchist group, were like, just, "Yeah, this land is my land." And I was like,
I don't know. I have to. I got a comment. You're like every one of your anarchist voices talking about this. Do anarchists actually talk like? I have anarchist friends. I have anarchist friends, and this is not anarchist voice. I'm sorry. And being an ML myself, I got to stick up for the anarchists here. Okay, so if you have me defending the anarchists, something's up.
No, that's my white voice, actually.
Sounds like Elmo.
But no, it was a profoundly...
I'm sorry. Now I'm imagining an Elmo anarchist. Oh my god! No gods, no masters.
No bedtimes, no masters. No grandmas, no masters. No grandmas, no masters. No masters.
I think there needs to be a TikTok of that character, actually.
Oh my god!
I would watch that.
Anarchist Elmo.
Nothing against anarchism. Like it was I have a deep respect. Like I'm not trying to take a dig. But it was because I encountered it in other left spaces as well. But it was a moment of like, clarity for me. I was like, holy shit. Like I am alienated from this political like identity, this collective political identity I thought like I had a lot of affinity with. And it wasn't, and it took me a long time to really come to that question of colonialism and like settler identity. And seeing it today, like even on Twitter, like I had to unfollow my own post because I was like, this stuff is vile. You people are vile. Like this is like saying really racist things to me just for like a song. It's like, just let it go, man. Like, cool.
Like leftists were.
Yeah.
That thread disturbed me. And then now the communists are coming in defense of that. Like, it's a workers' song. It's about workers' unity. And then I saw someone comment, which workers?
Exactly.
I'm looking at the 1940 lyrics. It's been rewritten a couple times. And the line, "God blessed America for me. This land was made for you and me." The "God blessed America" part looks like it got taken out later, but so problematic, right? So problematic. The violent imposition of forced Christianity, in addition to land theft. It's all right there. I don't see how you don't see it.
And Woody Guthrie was actually hired by the Department of Interior to write songs glorifying the damming of indigenous waterways, and specifically in the Northwest.
Yikes.
And he even talks about like killing Indians, finding Indian rifles that were still warm and slaughtering them. Like, I can't remember the exact lyric, but it was something to build the Grand Coulee Dam. So it's like, it's not like, oh, we're gonna cancel Woody Guthrie, but it's like, dude, the guy's like he's totally invested into the like settler mentality. That personally doesn't offend me. I actually prefer overt racism.
I agree. I totally agree.
The subvert racism. Yeah. So like, keep singing it because I know where you stand.
Yeah.
You got to work too hard to pull the racism out of people who think they aren't racist, and it's just it's really sucks up a lot of your life.
I agree. I did want to say one other thing that I don't know I've seen too many folks talk about, specifically with like J-Lo singing that song. So Huffington Post wrote this like, little piece or whatever and quoted some of Nick's tweets and some other people's tweets about this like indigenous
Shred Flintstone,
who's actually our comrade Joseph, who's on Red Power Hour. Shout out to Joseph.
Shreddy.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, J-Lo. But actually J-Lo, so this HuffPost piece was like, indigenous people have critiqued, this is my white voice also, so I'm just letting you know, indigenous people have critiqued, the Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land" for a long time because of the way that settlers use it. And I was like, it's true, but like J-Lo is Puerto Rican, and Puerto Rico is literally colonized by the United States. And so she actually comes from like a colonized people and a colonized nation. And so I actually she's part of the ruling class for sure, right? Like she's like a gazillionaire and she's a celebrity and stuff, but like she's not really like a settler in the same way that like a Biden, or like a white liberal would be. And so I was also like, this is very bizarre to see, like, when like identity politics and kind of like diversity politics and multiculturalism go like utterly horrific, when you're just like, wow, I cannot believe that like this colonized person, like literally somebody who comes from a colonized subjectivity, is singing this song about glorifying colonization. It was really trippy. Well, she wasn't really singing. It was like auto-tune.
That's what I was getting at like earlier when I was bringing that up. It's like, whether it's J-Lo or Chicano Batman singing this, like, I think it's because that song has come to represent, like the neoliberal multiculturalism of the U.S. And it's come to represent this, I guess, kind of like this signifier that the U.S. is, right, like the beacon melting pot for all, and that it represents some kind of alternative for migrant people. And so I don't know. And then also just like I think it also like intentionally undermines like the status of colonized people. Like it deters people from identifying themselves as colonized in a way.
Yeah, and I think like it's a good jumping off point to not only just understand the politics of the Biden administration and kind of the repeat of like the neoliberal multiculturalism and how that is a failed project. And there's a lot of emotional and effective investment into it. Like people are like very attached to it because it's like they feel so traumatized from Trump.
Yeah.
But I think it doesn't really amount to like actual material gains or the increased living standards of like everyday people. And so like the question, that I have for the, just to kind of close out this conversation, because we've gone all over the place, first of all, got to talk about Star Wars and Andray's questionable takes on,
and we're back
on Star Wars. But like, where do we
I will crush all of you, okay? If you actually want to get I'm purposely like joking to deflect from this discourse, but if you really want to get into it, I will absolutely obliterate all of you. But
let's do it. Let's have a Star Wars episode and I have my thoughts, but we are, to bring it back to...
and I'm gonna bring my friend Leslie Lee the third in on this one because Leslie has correct opinions on movies just like I do. So if y'all want to take both of us on, you feel free. All right.
Well, from the viewpoint of the Tusken Raiders, the indigenous people of Star Wars, what are your all like takeaways? Like going forward, what is is there a future for the United States? And does Biden represent that future?
I just threw up in my mouth.
Ugly. just all ugly, that question.
She took her earrings out and held her hair back before she did it. So.
Yeah, I know. Like, I felt like somebody on this podcast like Vaselined up their face to go scrap with Nick. No, wow. To answer that question, no, absolutely. Okay, I find it incredible actually that more people haven't figured this one out. It was actually my friend T, who runs a podcast called Champagne Sharks, who said this, and it makes absolute sense. Joe Biden's cachet was non-existent before becoming vice president in 2009, because prior to that, he'd run for president twice, failed spectacularly twice, wasn't particularly liked. Like, he was a figure in the Senate that people knew, like they knew his name, they respected him, but he wasn't necessarily liked. And it was the cachet from Barack Obama that is like serving as his vice president for 8 years that endeared him to black people. And then, like there was those those funny like meme Joe Biden, like Diamond Joe Biden articles that came out from The Onion that kind of like softened his character. Just like Hillary Clinton got a bit of an image rehab from like, sort of like progressive comedic media. But the cachet that Joe Biden got from serving under Barack Obama wasn't actually from Barack Obama, it was from Michelle Obama. Because keep in mind, Barack Obama wasn't the favored candidate prior to 2008. It wasn't until he won the Iowa caucus that people started to pay attention. And then when he won in North Carolina, that's when black people began to sort of like swing over to his side. But I remember in 2004, when people were introduced to him, when he did the keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention, some people started paying attention to him. He was very close to not winning his Senate seat when he ran for the Illinois seat in Senate. He was up against Mark Ryan, and Mark Ryan was likely to have won that election, but because a sex scandal came out with himself and his wife, Jerry Ryan, who played Seven of Nine on Star Trek Voyager, that hurt him enough that it knocked him out of the together. Yeah. Listen, I collect these things like I'm like one of those those junkers on Hoth. Okay, like that's me. I just walk around.
So
like,
is Nick. Okay, don't let him kid you. So
okay,
he's full of useless facts.
So it was after he lost after Mark Ryan dropped out of the Senate race, he was replaced with Alan Keyes. Alan Keyes was just a stupendously poor candidate. It was like a cakewalk for Barack Obama to win that federal Senate seat. But he still, like, even though people found him quote unquote articulate, people found him endearing, he had a clever tone of phrase, he could really do a speech. When he ran for the Democratic nomination, he announced he was going to put his hat into the ring in 2007. People were actually really upset with him because the assumption was that Hillary Clinton was going to run for president and she was going to win. And Barack was a bit of an upstart. He was like an upjumped, kind of nobody coming out of nowhere who was taking on the head of the Democratic machine. And a lot of black people questioned his blackness. Not only like questioned his background and his heritage, but the fact that his father wasn't even an African American. That, like, I remember those conversations, and it wasn't until he won in North Carolina that people were saying, "Oh wait, he could actually walk away with this thing," and started to get on his side. And Michelle Obama was the one that gave him that cachet when she started doing interviews with CNN and MSNBC, etc. That's when people started to warm up to the idea of this guy actually becoming president. It was his black wife, his African American wife, that gave him that credibility. So in a way, Michelle Obama gave Barack Obama enough credibility to become president, and that leftover cachet and credibility transferred over to Joe Biden. This is actually all coming from Michelle Obama, if you really want to think about it.
Yeah, there was and I haven't read any of his memoirs, but there was some white woman that he dated in university or graduate school who came out and was talking about him deliberately. I remember there was a bunch of articles on it. Him deliberately making the decision that would not be good for his career to be in a relationship like that. Did any of the rest of you hear that?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Anyway,
That was in David Garrow's book. He David Garrow, who I kind of take.
I think I saw an interview with her, didn't I? See, I think we saw. Anyway, we
an
can.
interview too. Okay.
Yeah, I saw interviews. Yeah, and I was like, oh, interesting. But I mean, I agree. I think the whole and I'm not as much of an insider to these conversations, but I do think she was incredibly important because of those kinds of divides that we see, right, or tense conversations we see between African Americans and people who are coming from other parts of the diaspora.
Yeah. So I mean to answer the original point, and you're absolutely correct. The question of whether Joe Biden is the standard bearer for the brand of politics that people thought that they were buying into during the Obama administration, and whether he can actually carry a progressive agenda, whether he can actually heal the matter of reconciliation and the matter of reparations for Black people. No, he's not interested in any of that. He never has been. People have sort of conferred those political sensibilities on him, but in the entire time that he was in the Senate, he was a center right senator. He never had the politics of a progressive. He was always emboldened. He was always, jeez. Well, I mean, he was emboldened to defend the financial companies, but he was always in the pocket of credit card and the financial industry. He was always a tough on crime, law and order type of Democrat. That's always been his identity. He's never ever identified as a progressive or ever done or tried to pass legislation or argued for policies that are remotely progressive. So I'm not really sure even where his people oftentimes label him as a moderate, but I'm not really sure where that comes from. He's a hawk. He's a foreign policy hawk, and he's a law and order Democrat. He's probably one dinner party snub away from being a blue dog Democrat.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so last night in Nick's talk, he referred to Biden as a polished turd, and I think that's absolutely accurate. I mean, what he has on offer, literally all he has to offer is that he's not Trump, and I think even people who aren't especially radical lefties, he doesn't even have much to offer them, and all these settlers gone wild that we're talking about in this episode, who are primarily these liberals, coming out with these just rowdy takes in defense of Biden and Kamala. I think it's kind of disturbing because it shows that they're actually being pushed further right. People are, oh, we're gonna hold Biden's feet to the fire, we're gonna push him further left. But I think what we're seeing is the opposite going down. We're seeing these liberals actually being pushed further right. And so, but then at the same time, I also think all around, Biden doesn't offer anything particularly new. He's literally it's so funny because his slogan, bring America back, and it's well, it didn't go anywhere, but it's also pretty on brand, because I mean that's literally what's going down. He's reinforcing the status quo. He's going to continue these gruesome imperialist projects as he has done in the past. And it's just kind of silly because if the question is, does he represent the future, it's or what does he have to offer the future? I don't know. I just think his base of support will probably dwindle out quickly, and I think it's scary because you see the ultra right or the alt-right gaining power, and Lord knows what that's going to become over the course of his presidency and after.
Yeah.
I just don't really see what I don't see. First of all, the base of support, there is no base of support. It was all anti-Trump sentiment. If you build an entire campaign around getting one person out of office, then you haven't built a coalition. You've mobilized people for one specific purpose. Now that the purpose has been accomplished, what is there left to do? And second, he didn't promise anything. He didn't actually. If you looked at the Biden domestic and foreign policy pages on his website, it was just bog standard, we're going to strive for clean energy, and we're going to support small businesses, and we're going to create stipends for Black small businesses, which of course are going to end up being means tested into the ground. But it was just regular pot. It was boilerplate stuff. There was nothing that was being promised. There were no campaign promises that they were highlighting in the advertisements, etc. So I don't really know, like, basically any policy that he enacts is going to be brand new to a lot of people. They'll be hearing about it for the first time because they definitely have never heard about it on the campaign, and whatever base of support that he had leading into this election has already dispersed, and all that's left is like bitter liberal white women who are angry that we have not well enough appreciated the killer style, like the amount of slay that these South Asian and Black designers, like Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama, were absolute drip. And if you cannot respect the drip, then you don't respect women, is what I'm trying to say. That's the conversation we're having now.
Truly.
Well, I'm just going to refer to a meme that has been circulating that Nick shared of Joe Biden arriving at the inauguration. And the image in that, it's actually a GIF, it's not a meme. So you press on it, and it's an old white man in a casket falling out of the casket. And it's like Joe Biden arriving at the inauguration. That is both hilarious, but also, I think, an appropriate metaphor for how I feel about the future of America.
Oh yeah,
you know,
his video addresses. Sorry, go ahead.
No, he's like half dead. Anyway, he needs to be resuscitated constantly. But but like the Democrats are trying to resuscitate something that like that ship sailed, like that cake was baked, like it's just done. Like, at the beginning of a year ago, right before the pandemic hit, when the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, attacked those land defenders and those matriarchs out of Unistoten camp, right, who are protecting ancestral unceded Wet'suwet'en land. And they declared, those matriarchs, they said reconciliation is dead, right? They declared that. I know that's so-called Canada, but like, let that sink into your hearts. That happened a year ago. Like, reconciliation died. Like the resuscitation of like the America, that, this like this fantasy America that everyone is talking about, that died already. And that there is, in fact, I think different political possibilities and alternatives that are brewing. We're clearly brewing and being cleansed by fire, literal fire, in 2020. And it's coming primarily from Black and Indigenous people. Let's just be honest. Let's be honest about where that's coming from. And as you said, Kim, it's like these people, I got an email from, who I'm presuming she's a white liberal. I wrote this op-ed about Deb Haaland.
Yes, I tweeted it.
Oh, thank you. Well, this woman, she emailed me and she was like, I'm just upset. She's like, I'm not really trying to offend you. She says, but when you say that Native people want all the land back, where will white people go?
They totally tell
Into
them themselves
the sea.
because they know they
Into
kick
the
your ass
fucking
out.
sea.
Just keep walking.
We are building two big ass piers, okay, off the coast of New York and California. We'll have to find the appropriate place, but we are marching all of you into the fucking sea. Enjoy.
Put you on chains.
Go colonize the Great Barrier Reef, fuckers.
No.
Damn, you all went so much harder than I was just gonna go. Just gonna reverse Mayflower that shit.
But I know, you just look at them, you're like, are you really? Yeah, I just it's hard. I don't know. I don't like this word hope. Like Barack Obama wrecked that word for me in that cheesy poster. But I talk about radical hope. I try to find other ways of saying it. The thing that really struck me in the Biden inauguration that I watched this morning is his use of this word unity. And I know we've seen a bunch of people on Twitter, Black people especially, saying unity with people who would kill us. Are you kidding me? But it's unity on stolen land, unity that's dependent on the ongoing subjugation of many, many disempowered people, both at home and abroad, for U.S. power and prosperity. So it's unity of the relatively few privileged against the rest of the world. I want no part of that kind of unity. That's unity predicated on death of most people, death and suffering of most people. And I don't see how you'd see the Democrats any other way but that. So that word unity is now wrecked for me too, in addition to the word hope. I think we need a name change. There is no United States. Let's think about how we live well together outside of forcing everybody to be included into a settler state narrative and norm. That is ultimately about genocide and dispossession and suffering of the many for the few. And how can we get behind that?
And what you just said, Kim, how do we live together outside of this like genocidal, anti-Black, racist, right? Notion of unity?
Yeah.
That's the direction that humanity is heading. And like, I'm sorry that liberals are like 10 years behind the rest of us who have already reconciled this in ourselves about like what the future of is going to look like. But that's me in my mind. I see that that's where we're heading. And like there's no going back. Like you just can't resuscitate the zombie. Like it's just gonna die. Like it's a dying order. That's just the truth. If you can't handle it, read some books, like get into your fields or whatever, and like come join us as we're like building this new world, because that is firmly where like millions of the world's population are headed. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, and just to kind of end it on a more like a positive, I don't hate to say that. It's like not trying to like qualify what
Hope.
Yeah, I was gonna say hope.
Hope.
But I was like, oh, Kim's gonna judge me.
No, not at all. It's English is very limited and compromised, and we're speaking English, so there's only so much we can do.
This is true. And I think
Yeah.
I think what everyone is pointing to is that there are real alternatives out there. And the settler kind of mentality is that there's no alternative but the settler state or the United States. And I think that's a very cynical way to live. Like,
Is there no alternative?
Stop. Oh my God. Jen, okay, quick aside. Jen bought me for Christmas a Mark Fisher capitalist realism blanket. It's like a full size.
Oh, hell
blanket.
yes.
Thank you, Andre.
I want a capitalist realism weighted blanket. Like it feels like Mark Fisher from The Great Beyond is just wrapping his loving arms around me. I want that.
His pessimism.
Andre, was it you who tweeted, or was it somebody else I follow, that the real cynics are the people who think that we can't make another world, that it takes a lot of optimism to.
Yeah.
Was that you?
That wasn't me, but that is very wise.
I tweeted somebody who said that there was like basically they were saying it was the angry sociologist.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that person.
And they were saying something like, people think that revolutionaries are a very pessimistic person. And it's like to wake up every single day and to confront this like death machine and this, this system that's, built on so much suffering and despair and, nightmarish violence it takes a lot of optimism and not the kind of like, naive optimism of just believing if you're a good person, things will change, but optimism that things can and will change. And I do think that like the banded, uprising that happened last year is a sign. It's not, obviously the tactic of, spontaneous uprising has its limitations, but nonetheless represents a spirit that simply cannot be crushed, even after like centuries of genocide. And in my mind, I don't use this term either very often, the term resilience, but it has been so resilient to like actual genocide that it represents the kind of world that we all want to live in. Not survival, but like actual like the proliferation of Blackness, of indigeneity.
Yep.
That's what decolonization in my mind, means. It's not it's not the elimination of difference. It's the proliferation of certain kinds of orders of being a good relative, right? And I think that's incredibly hopeful. It's something I wake up to. I put my put one leg, or what do they call it, one pant leg on time every day, full of good relationality. At least I try to.
And it's not the elimination of like white people, right? Like this idea like, oh, are you going to do to us what we did to you? It's the elimination of settler ontology for damn sure, right? As like the ordering principle of how the rest of us are ranked in this like hierarchy of value that's assigned to life, including other than human life, not just human life. And so, yeah, man, it would definitely require. We've been talking about settler onticide.
It's actually a joke, by the way. Like, I want to just be clear that it was a bunch of grad students and junior faculty who were sitting around, and there was a lot of language that was getting thrown around, especially in like anthropology circles and like the ontological term, which is useful in some ways. But so we were like, let's invent a term, and so we invented. I actually don't know who I don't know which one of us in our circle originated that term. but we came up with the term settler onticide to describe what we're trying to accomplish.
I ended my 2019 CalFu article with that, the caretaking, not American dreaming.
Yeah.
The editor said, make sure you add it's not literal killing. I'm like, duh. No, you have to add it. Okay.
I mean, and I think what we saw go down this summer is, I mean, that's the reason why Biden is trying so hard. I mean, not Biden himself, but like why all these liberals and all of this, like, you know, this like spectacular, like show of whatever, of unity, or, you know, calling on like these manifest destiny narratives. Like the reason this attempt to revive the US is being pushed so hard is because we saw this summer how very illegitimate and invalid the US is in and of itself. Like in showing that these possibilities for a new world are possible and that people were actually like materially enacting them, I think is, you know, the reason Biden is running on just like promising that he can reinforce the status quo for all of these liberals shitting their pants.
And that's a good place to end it.